to the rider.
Grande Davide!
Was rolled out earlier on today in glorious conditions. About 7 kilometres of neutral. Riders smiling, pretty happy. It just started just south of the city. 25 teams took to the start line. 18 World Tour teams, 7 wildcard teams made up of various pro-continental teams. There's a Pozzato just signing on. Gaviria, the young Colombian sprint sensation, one of the outside favourites for today. There's a Remo.
Ladies and gentlemen, now please welcome on to the stage another team from France as we say good morning to FDJ.
Hey Michael!
Arida team, Diego Ulisi. Nasser Bouhani just signing on there, one of the outside favourites, took 6th place last year. Another favourite just signing on, Michael Matthews. There's Team Sky, Geraint Thomas there, and there's Vincenzo Nibali.
Giro d'Italia, Tour de France, Vuelta Spagna, due Tirreno Adriatico, Lombardia, Vincenzo Nibali! Arriva Agnoli, arriva in questo istante anche Capecchi, una tappa al Giro d'Italia e poi è il turno di Lars Boom, una tappa al Tour, una tappa alla Vuelta in Spagna. Procediamo con gli atleti in forza ad Astana Pro Team. Sta firmando intanto con il dorsale numero 36 Lorenz De Vrese e poi è il turno di Luis Leon Sanchez. 4 tappe al Tour de France, vincitore della prova in linea ai giochi europei di Baku, quindi arriva anche Andriy Grifko. E procediamo, andiamo a chiudere appunto questa rappresentativa con il lettone Gatis Bukulik. Signore e signori, questa è Astana Pro Team.
Cominciamo a entrare nella parte caldissima. Un applauso a Astana Pro Team.
Again, not his favourite sort of course, but he'll certainly be aggressive in the last few stages. Greg Van Avermaet and his BMC team. Robbie Starr signing on, and there, the man in the rainbow band.
On to the start line, 25 teams, 199 riders taking to the start of Milano-San Remo, presented by Namet Sports. We will find out soon, in a few hours' time.
Ele não faz a foto, ele faz isso. Dove sai?
Vai Greg! Aí!
Dai!
Has been speaking to Oscar Freire, picking his brains, and some great tips and advice. Will it be the year for Michael Matthews? Will he be the third Australian winner? Only time will tell. Meanwhile, we're going to head over to the... So here we are on your screen now with just over 101 kilometres to go of Milan-San Remo. We have a breakaway of...
Eccoli qua. Ah, beh, scampagnata, eh. Allora! Cos'è, una protesta? Si piano. Facciamo anche così.
En sortant de l'école, nous avons rencontré un bon chemin de fer dans un vallon.
Arnaud, very dangerous rockfall indeed, blocking the road. And we understand the riders and
del blog di Piercarlo Lava, sono Federico e Risolfi, mi trovano a Ligure e Mazzini in attesa del passaggio della Milano-San Remo, edizione numero 107. Alle ore 11:15 sono passati 11 uomini in fuga. In questo momento sta arrivando il gruppo. La Milano-San Remo è considerata la classica di primavera, gara che oggi verrà disputata in condizioni ottimali. Il corridore, dopo essere transitati in via Mazzini, si presteranno a transitare davanti al Museo del Ciclismo, dove ci sarà il traguardo volante. La prima sperticità che si troveranno di fronte sarà il passo del Turchino, poi dopo a Lassio, in ordine di successione Capomeli, Capo Cervo e Capo Berta, poi a 30 km dal traguardo la salita della Cipressa, poi quasi a fine corsa si apprestano fare la salita del Poggio, che è considerata la salita più insidiosa perché ha un'asperità che va dal 3 all'8%. Il traguardo è previsto in via Roma a Sanremo intorno alle ore 17. I corridori favoriti per la corsa sono il campione del mondo per Sagan e non dimentichiamo nomi illustri quali Fabian Cancellara, Tom Bonen, Mark Cavendish.
Raccoglila, Simo!
This convoy were deviated on an auto route. We think it's only added about 5 kilometres to the race total, but here's your breakaway. 11 riders in total, and we'll just run through those riders for you. Jedinas Bagdonas of AG2R, Lithuanian rider. Sergei Tvetkov of Androni Giacotoli, one of the few Romanian professional cyclists on the scene. Mirko Maestri of Bardiani CSF is also there. Jan.
Questo significa che sono in fuga da 125.
Arrivano!
Sì, ci sono.
Arrivano!
Tu ci sei?
Io sì.
Attivalo!
Dai!
Ragazzi!
Forza!
Wow!
Tento!
Peter! Forza! Dai!
antagonists of Bora Argon 18 in the mix. Ezrin Turek of CCC Sprandi Polkovici in the orange jersey is also there. Roger Kluger, the German from I Am Cycling. Matteo Bono of Lampre Merida. He was
Sì.
Samuel Conti of southeast Venezuela in the grey and fluoro yellow kit is also there. Marcin Cilingi, himself a veteran of breakaways in Milan-San Remo, of Lotto NL Jumbo, also in the mix. Andre Perron in the white of Team Novo Nordisk, and rounding out the group is Marco Coldan of Trek Segafredo. Well, I'm Matt Stevens, and alongside me for the journey today, for the last 100k of the opening classic of the year, is former British road champion and general manager of Dimension Data, Brian Smith. Brian, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's one of the, well, it is the big monument here in Italy, especially this weather today. It's absolutely amazing. You consider Paris-Nice, where the stage was. Here is absolutely fantastic for racing. It was 12 degrees in Milan at start, nice and sunny, and traditionally we get a large breakaway, and the breakaway had an advantage of just under 10 minutes, and you can see it's been cut down by 5 minutes. We caught a glimpse of the teams riding at the front of the bunch. The surprise for me is Trek have actually put a rider in here. It means that they don't have to put any riders at the front of the peloton.
They certainly don't. It's an interesting strategy. As you see, one of the Tinkoff wires, looks like that's Manuele Boaro just taking the wrong side, and it is actually Dimension Data just setting the tempo at the front at the moment. But while we talk about the Trek Segafredo team, it's interesting they have put somebody out in front, as you say. They've got Cancellara there, the former winner, of course, but they've got real strength in depth, especially in relation to riders who can finish this race. Well, Bonifacio was there. He was 5th last year. They've got Fabio Fellini and Giacomo Nizzolo, both very, very fast finishes indeed. But of course, Brian, what that does do is just take the pressure off, but it's not something I expected to see either. Well, as we look at the bunch snaking along the Azorian coast, we're going to take our first commercial break. led at speed now. Average speed for the race so far, just over 43 kilometres an hour, but earlier on. The race. These are the pictures that we got from Valtteri, which meant the race had to be deviated and sent along the highway. Well, there we go. There's the picture of the landslide, a significant landslide. A couple of cars were actually crushed. We understand a couple of people sadly were injured there, but the race could not pass through. So there wasn't too much of a delay. This happened way ahead of the race, so the organisers did have the opportunity to reroute without causing too much disruption to the race itself. The race did about 5 kilometres further, deviated via the motorway, the Autostrada, and now they're back on schedule again. The breakaway are rolling through extremely effectively. But Brian, over the last few years, we've seen breaks go out to sort of 10, 11, 12 minutes, and even at this stage in the race, 95 k's to go, the gap has come down. It seems to be as if the teams who want to try and perform well in this race are kind of measuring their effort far more, well, a little bit in more of a focused manner.
Well, when you look at the way the race has gone this year, you have to look at the tactics of a lot of the teams, and a favourite in Cancellara. So I'm kind of surprised that some of the other teams allowed this to happen, but you can't control everything, because obviously the pre-plan before you go out in the team bus, it's like make sure nobody from maybe Tinkoff and BMC, possibly Trek, Orica, Green Edge get in the breakaway, because it gives the whole team an easier ride all day. So you know, when you look at the teams that are made up, we've got 5 World Tour teams in this break of 11, and then you've got the wild cards. The wild cards are here to get obviously the publicity. You know, they're not expecting too much from this race. If they can get to the finish, if they can get in the top 10 or top 6, that's brilliant for them. We've had wildcards winning in the past. Selig won with MTN Quebec, so there's opportunities. But this race today, because it's in good conditions, they're riding fast. You cannot allow the breakaway to get too much distance down the road. And there's 11 riders in it. But the importance is Colidan is there for Trek. And that's the important factor. It means that all of Trek do not have to put riders at the front. Here we see Tinkoff at the front, Dimension Data. You've also got Cofidis and Orica Green Edge Ethics. So you've got 5 teams. It looks as if maybe one rider from Lotto Soudal is maybe helping out. But definitely we've got 5 riders from 5 different teams, keeping this gap about 5 minutes. And that's what happens. Jay Thompson is the rider from Dimension Data. He already knows what his job was yesterday. The breakaway goes away and he is going to be used to ride at the front. So 5 riders' jobs were already nominated yesterday, and now that's why the 5 riders are at the front controlling the breakaway.
Well, there we go. Interesting composition, as you said, Brian. 5 World Tour teams putting the pressure, putting the onus on the other squads to ride as we go. Some absolutely stunning views here, and some of the best conditions we've had. Looking back over the last few editions of Milan-San Remo, we've seen some absolutely awful conditions. But this will, I think, affect... I think there'll be more riders in the mix because of the conditions we've got here, Brian. You know, still a long, long day, and a day that's all about conserving as much energy as you can, especially if you're in, you know, looking to be in at the kill at the end.
You're dead right, Matt, because at the end of the day, when you've got really harsh conditions, when Christoph won it a couple of years ago, it was purely because of the really harsh conditions, and it was difficult for everybody to sprint after that distance. But today...
Lots of interesting stats, especially in a monument. So much history in this race. And some interesting stats looking back over the last couple of years that you may be interested in. And that's the number of riders that were in the finishing group. Got this interesting stat from the Inner Ring website, so thank you very much for that. 2015, last year, 26 riders made the finishing group. 2014, when Alexander Kristoff took victory, and there's bad conditions, 27 riders. And then previous to that, we had the course changes. So 2013, only 7 riders were there. 2012, just 3. 2011, 8 riders. And then prior to that, when the course was flatter, we didn't have the Mienne climb. 25 riders and 34 riders. And this race so open. So it's the sprinters, the punchers, and the riders who can climb well too. Such an unpredictable race, and that's what gives it this wonderful tension. By his teammate, that's Serge Pauls. Cavendish had a rear puncture, but no panic at all for the Manxman. Bit of an outside bet for today. Of course, has spent the season, well, the off-season, or the off-the-road season, sorry, riding on the track. He's ended up World Madison champion with Bradley Wiggins. What a memorable performance that was, but a real depth in strength in the Dimension Data team. Again, I think we might as well just run through some favourites, Brian. As you see, Kluge there, I think he's, well, that's, again, this race is that long, it really does sap the strength. It's also very, gets stiffness in muscles. It's not a technique we see particularly often, Brian. I'd often put my heel down to stretch my hamstrings out, but again, a pretty skilled rider. But it is unusually long, this race, and we understand from information coming through to us that the addition of the loop, because of the landsliders, made this race 300 kilometres in length, but also add to that 7 kilometres of neutral. So I don't know if any riders for this particular race were sat on the turbo trainers like we see. I wouldn't have thought that happened, but 300 Ks is the full distance today, so real epic distance. But you do see it, Brian, don't you? It's important that you keep your, especially on a flatter course as well, it's very easy to get aches and pains in your lower back, etc.
Yeah, just stretching his leg out. Some people do it, like you say, just putting your heel down. Other people, put their leg over, their foot over the saddle. And Roger Kluge is another one. They rode the Omnium at the World Championships only a couple of weeks ago and got silver medal to Gaviria. Gaviria's riding this race as well. So, just touching on Mark Cavendish, he is an outsider. He rode through Tirreno. He rode well after a difficult Madison, as you mentioned. He crashed for it pretty hard. So, these conditions, there could be a lot of riders in the mix at the end, so you never know. But, Nibali's come out and saying they're going to ride aggressively. There are other teams in here that are going to ride aggressively. When you look at the sprinters, Bahani's riding well, Matthews is riding well, Peter Sagan, is he going to do better than second? He's capable of doing it. So, but there's other fast sprinters in here, so it's how they play out. I would think that BMC's Van Avermaet would want it hard. So, BMC Ethics, especially in Tirreno, were pretty aggressive and looked pretty strong. I tell you what, Cancellara looked really, really strong in that stage that Steve Cummings won, and he was just preparing. He was used in Tirreno by his team, but he's just preparing for this race, and he looks super strong.
He does. I mean, I think the key to this race, it is a race that is very, very open. Many riders, including Fabian Cancellara, the past winner back in 2008, has called it a lottery. Mark Cavendish is the same. It's unpredictable because, I was reading a very interesting interview with Ben Swift, who said generally there is a selection that's made through the accumulation of fatigue and the fact that the last, couple of climbs, or the last 5 climbs, if you include the trio of Capo climbs, Capo Miele, Servo and Berta, they're all set fair to just start to sap the strength from the legs. Then we hit the Cipressa and the Poggio. But generally speaking, although there's sprinters in the mix, the winner always comes from a relatively select group. And over the last couple of years, last year 26 riders in the front, the year before 27 riders in the front. But normally when you get a sprint from a small group of riders in a stage race, for example, generally the selection, unless it's been made in the crosswinds, has been made on the climbs. But here you always seem to get good sprinters in the mix, but again, a lot of them without teammates. One of the only teammates left last year was Luca Paolini, who's not here. He played an absolutely pivotal role in the race. I think that could be a very interesting factor as well. Completely sacrificed himself. But what the riders like what Cancellara will want, what Peter Sagan will want, what Greg Van Avermaet will want, and what I know Geraint Thomas and Ben Swift will want is an extremely hard finale to really whittle that group down.
Well, you look what happened last year when Team Sky took it on and they wanted it aggressive. When we look at the final, the first red point in this final is 27.1 kilometres ago when it turns right to the suppressor. Like we already mentioned, There are riders that know yesterday this is their job. Breakaway goes away, you're the person that's going to have to ride. Another know their job for positioning into that right-hand corner.
Some interesting points again there, Brian. We'll talk about those again at length in a few moments' time, but we've got some more stats for you. Numbers of Grand Tour starters up there with the best as well, but Sosato, a great character, and still racing extremely strongly. And the bunch being led by Dimension Data at the moment. The gap 4 minutes and 6 seconds, but clearly, Brian, we can now see Astana moving up to the front. There's a real sense of purpose about the chase now. But again, rather than trying to bring this back, it's just making sure, I guess, that it's brought back to like a controllable distance where they don't have to spend too much energy late on in the day.
Yeah, that's exactly that. And it's just about controlling things. 5 teams are riding, 1 rider each at the front of the peloton. They want to keep the tempo up, but it's obviously good to see that other teams are helping out. See Simon Yates talking to Matt White here. They've got a favourite. He rode terrifically well, 2 stage wins in Paris-Nice, and that's Michael Matthews. So there's game plans for every team here. We just have to see how it plays out.
Well, we're going to take another short commercial break. Grab some beat. Welcome back. It's feeding time for the riders. Many of the riders in the breakaway dropping back, making sure the fuel levels are topped up. Same for the riders in the peloton. Domestiques making sure the team leaders have got enough to eat and enough to drink. And I think I was reading some tweets earlier on, Brian, before we came on air. I think it was the Cannondale team. They were just on the radio constantly, especially in the earlier stages of the race, just reminding the riders to keep eating and drinking as early as half an hour straight into the race, because as we said, the accumulation of fatigue, given they're going to be riding for nearly 7 hours, last year's winning time was 6 hours 46, you cannot, you know, relax. You need to concentrate, because otherwise it's so easy over this sort of distance, even though the weather conditions are good, to suddenly get the hunger flat, and once that happens, it's game over.
Well, it's hard to concentrate for 6.5 hours, you know, throughout, and you know, you need that kind of constant reminder sometimes. These are professional bike riders, but they do fall asleep from time to time, and you know, they need the reminders. But you know, because of the weather conditions, it'll mean that you can ride closer to the wheel. The bunch can ride a little bit more together, so you can save a bit more energy, because if it's wet and cold, there's a bit more, there's bigger gaps in the peloton, and you don't hold the wheel as close, so you're not getting that, you know, that benefit. So today's finish is going to be somewhat faster, possibly, than the, you know, if it was wetter and colder. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be, you know, 60 or 80 riders coming into San Remo. There's always a break point. When you go over Suppressor and then a Poggio, and you've got 3 capos before that, it's a whittling down effect, and it's always about, you know, 25, 30 riders that come into San Remo, and that's expected today. It's just a pure speed, and it just breaks because of the corners and the speeds in the Poggio.
Let me just show the shot of Manuel Cinziato of BMC getting some feed, some bidons into his back pocket, and a nice romantic slow-mo picture of Sam.
And he only went with about 1.5 kilometres.
He did. He only went with about a K to go. Just powered his way. Well, just opened up a bit of a gap. And if you've been watching, if you've been following Fabian over the last few weeks on Eurosport, you can see that shot repeated. But that's the danger. Fabian Cancellara in his pomp. And is it fair to say, Brian, looking at his performances over the last few weeks, his preparation for Tirreno, and the fact that he seems to be enjoying riding his bike after an extremely problematic year last year, he is definitely a threat without a shadow of a doubt. He's in fine form, he's relaxed, he's won this monument before, so he hasn't got that innate pressure of trying to win a monument for the first time, like Greg Van Avermaet has, like Peter Sagan has. So he can relax and do what he wants, and he's got a great team around him as well.
Yeah, he had obviously a lot of bad luck last year, and that injury, I think it was Eduardo of Flandern, when he crashed out and hurt himself. So he's come back. He said this is his last year, and you know, obviously luck has been on his side this year. He said no problems, not been involved with any crashes, and he had a great start of the year in Mallorca with taking out that win over arguably a very hard course. And obviously I saw him in Tirreno, and he looked super strong there, winning the time trial, and you know, the stage that Steve Cummings won, he was on the front there, you know, ripping it to pieces. So it does look as if he's on good form. And the way he actually won Strade Bianche was amazing, because as we see now, Démare is on some really good form, and to hold him off, it was, you know, exceptional. So, you know, I wish Cancellara best of luck in the classics and even today, because he has been an amazing bike rider, especially in the classics, and this is his last year, and unfortunately we're not going to see him racing next year. So like you say, Matt, he can afford to relax. He's a sponsor's dream as well, so yeah, he'll be sadly missed in the peloton.
He certainly will. Reading one of the interviews a couple of days back with Cancellara, there's a few people have been suggesting he might give it another year, because there's a relative degree of ambiguity in relation to the intentions of Tom Bonan and Alberto Contador. They're saying they're going to retire possibly at the end of 2016, although that is a little bit open-ended. None have indefatigably said that they are going to stop. But Fabian Cancellara has been speaking to his peers within the peloton, Mark Cavendish being one, speaking to him in Tirreno, just clarifying, are you really going to be gone? Is this the last year? And he is definitely saying yes. So this is the final time you will see Fabian Cancellara riding this beautiful race, the opening classic of the year. And such an unpredictable race. I've been feeling the tension over the last few days. I think with the addition and the focus that social media throws upon racing in general, you get the sense the tension builds. It really is a race that is extremely special, and to win it really sets up a career. But there's Jay Thompson doing his job on the front. Only one Dimension Data rider just on the front at the moment. 5 other teams in the mix. A bit of a refresh for you with just under 77 kilometers to go. 11 leaders out in front. The lead 3 minutes and 39 seconds. And the 11 riders consist of Dimitas Bagdonas, the Lithuanian rider riding for AG2R, Sergei Svetkov of Androni Giocattoli, the Romanian on that team. He's the current Romanian national road champion. Mirko Maestri of Bardiani CSF is in the mix. Jan Barta, the Czech, riding on Bora Argon 18. Edin Šurek of CCC Sprandi, Roger Kluger of Yam Cycling. Matteo Bono of Lanfranc Merida is there. Samuel Conti of Southeast Venezuela. Martin Cilingi of Lotto NL Jumbo. Andre Peron of Team Novo Nordisk. Marco Coldan of Trek. Segafredo. That's your breakaway. We've got 76 kilometers still to run in Milan-San Remo. Please stay with us here on Eurosport. 4 kilometers to go now, as the riders just hop over one of the sleeping policemen in the road there. This is your breakaway. 3 minutes and 42 the lead. The rider just on the back there, Adrian Šurek of CCC Sprandi Polkovici. Again, another gorgeous sight. The scenery and the architecture on this part of the world, Brian, absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I first came here when I was 16, spent my 16th birthday here along this coast, absolutely fell in love with it. So, you know, obviously I was there in July when it was, you know, really nice temperatures, but today is not so bad. 12 degrees in Milan when we started, and nice and sunny. 11 riders still in front, and, you know, looking at the strength and depth there, you know, they had almost 10 minutes advantage. And that's not a lot. We've seen gaps go up to almost, you know, 20 minutes in Milan-San Remo, but there are some stronger riders in this breakaway. Barta being one of them, a 31-year-old Czech rider riding for Bora, national time trial champion. You know, Svetkov, the Romanian champion, good rider. We've already seen Kluger for IAM. Cilingi, strong rider, 38-year-old, the Dutch rider.
Loves a long break, doesn't he?
Exactly. He's always getting involved with it. Bagdonas, the Lithuanian rider. Strong rider for AG2R. So the bunch aren't giving these riders any rope whatsoever. There are 5 teams riding in front of the peloton. That's Orica, Green Edge, Dimension Data, Ethics Orica, and Cofidis and Tinkoff are riding at the front of the bunch. So 5 teams riding, and they're just keeping it, and it's coming down even more. We're starting to get into almost the Capo area. Next up is Ciare, Albenga, and then Alessio, then Laguiglia, and then we start the first of the Capos, and it's Capo Mele, which comes at just over 50 kilometres to go to the finish.
Well, that was Gatis Merkulis just dropping back to his team car. He's getting a bead on, a couple of words of advice from his director sportif before rejoining the back of the group. But last year, Brian, we saw wetter conditions, nothing it wasn't the same as the conditions we saw the previous years, but it was wet, and it did make the descent of the Cipressa very, very slippery indeed. And it was quite stressful because there was quite a few riders that came to grief, even on the descent of the Poggio. But today, thankfully, it's dry. It is going to be a little bit different, isn't it, in relation to how the riders, or the feeling within the peloton in the last few kilometres when there's dry conditions. As you say, the gaps between the riders will be minimal, whereas riding in the wet on those descents, arguably, there was more damage caused on the descent of those 3 climbs on the run into the finish than on the ascents.
Yeah, it's still dangerous because when it's dry like this, they'll take more risks, and, you know, coming off the Poggio, it's toe curling stuff, and you know, when you're in the front group, there'll possibly be about 25-30 riders, and you know, some riders will be looking around and seeing some of the, you know, the top sprinters there. So will there be attacks? Yeah, of course there will. Suppressor, I think in a day like today, you'll get a lot of the other teams without a kind of big sprinter capable of winning in a group sprint. I think they'll start racing it from the Suppressor now. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out, but we know that 5 teams are just controlling things. Strong breakaway, they're still riding all together. The gap coming down under 4 minutes, still a long way to go, but this is going to be a fascinating finish. Is it going to come to a sprint like last year? Who knows? Is it going to be a small group? Are we going to see a solo winner? That's what keeps us guessing. We don't know, but rest assured that there's a lot of riders wanting this hard in the end. So it'll be really fast over Suppressor and Poggio this year.
You know, we talk about the attributes needed to win a race like Milan-San Remo. You clearly have to be, well, you need luck on your side. You need to be in very, very good physical shape. You need to have conserved your energy. You need a very, very good team around you. But fundamentally, what you need is the ability to make a decision, an innate decision, and just in one attack, whether it's the final sprint to victory or it's an attack that's going to stick. And I guess as we get nearer and nearer the finish, with so many riders arguably in the mix, and we'll see how things pan out when we hit obviously the 3 capos, arguably more damage will be done on the Cipressa. But it's about not showing your hand too early, and again, not panicking under pressure. And that is a real valuable attribute, which we've seen Greg van Avermaet over the last few months, specifically after being the bridesmaid for so many occasions. All of a sudden, almost, he's become, you know, almost, I don't know, he's got this dark side to him. He's very, very clinical in his ability to finish, and that's certainly what you need in a race like this.
Looking at Van Avermaet, are there faster sprinters? Yeah, there's faster sprinters in this group. Everybody is allowed to field 8 riders, but these 8 riders we've already mentioned, there are 5 teams. Orica, Dimension Data Ethics, Tinkoff and Cofidis, they already had pre-planned. When the break goes away, you have to ride on the front. So their riders are nominated. Then there's 1 or 2 riders nominated for that corner, the right-hand corner with just over 27 kilometres to go onto the Suppressor. It's all about positioning, and everybody knows that corner, so everybody's going to be trying to get into that with their team leader, and that's where you see crashes and the dangers. That's their job done. So then there's another job. If you go over the Suppressor, you're the person that's going to maybe attack from the Suppressor to the Poggio, allowing your team leader to sit on the wheels. Then it comes to where you're going to attack on the Poggio. You're going to get halfway up, or like everybody attacks towards the top. So it's intriguing how it's going to play out.
Well, a fascinating deconstruction of the tactical approach to this race. Welcome back. The chasing peloton being led by Tinkoff and Dimension Data as they go through one of 2 formal feed zones today. So important, as we talked about earlier on at the top of the show, that the riders take on board as much fuel as they can, keeping things topped up. They'll be eating from within 20-25 minutes of the race, making sure things are topped up. And as Brian was talking about, there's a real structure to the tactics that are employed. Each rider with a set objective, whether that's a thing to do, whether it's to protect the riders from the wind, to go back and grab bottles, or to tee things up later on in the race. But, you know, we've got so many potential winners here, Brian, and this is one of the reasons why things get get a bit frantic, get very, very stressful before the end. It's all about positioning as we head to the Cipressa. Positioning it then, of course, before we hit the final climb of the Poggio, and that's what ramps the speed up so much. And when you throw into the mix something we talked about yesterday, is the average speeds of races now, and the fact that pro riders are going quicker. There's various reasons for that. They've got more aerodynamic kit, they've got better rolling resistance, they're riding generally wider tyres with faster wheels, the bikes are more aero, and from a physiological perspective, riders are now pushing the limits. So, but the faster you go, the harder it is to actually make incremental improvements in front of that, isn't it? But things are getting, and it's just very interesting the way things play out. But speed, I think, is a factor, isn't it?
Yeah, as I think across you know, all the teams, everything's getting closer and closer, and just see the dangers in the feed station there as one of the Tinkoff bag breaks as soon as he gets it, and unfortunately that can cause problems in the peloton. You can just see a back wheel skip from one of the Cannondale riders, and that's the dangers of feed stations, and not the easiest places to work in, especially, you know, the Swan Ures. They do a very good job. There's 2 official feed stations today, and you know, it's dangerous. These riders are going through these feed stations at you know, 45-50 k's an hour, taking bags, and you know, one breaking, and you know, we've seen damage done in the past, but we just saw a bag break from Tinkoff causing problems for Cannondale. But there is a lot of nerves in this race. This is, you know, obviously the longest of the monuments. It's maybe not the most difficult. When you look at Flanders or Roubaix, there's different points, there's different red spots where you have to be at the front. But today, everybody knows that 27.1 kilometres have to be in the front, but every team knows that. And so for the last 20 kilometres, it's like the finish of a race. That's what it's like. It's a finish. And when you get a finish, they know in the last 20 kilometres they start riding towards that finish. So you'll see the speed rapidly go up, and this group possibly absorbed by then for that right-hand corner, and they'll start, you know, ripping up the capos on the way there to get position for that corner onto the suppressor. It's crucial because the speed they go up there, that's where it breaks.
Well, we know when they hit the slopes of the Poggio, it's not a particularly steep climb. I mean, the gradients for the Poggio itself, it's 3.7 kilometres in length as the breakaway just weave their way through. Great crowds at the side of the road cheering the riders on. But the Poggio, 3.7 k's with only an average gradient of 3.7%. that pitches out at its maximum at 8%, so nothing particularly steep, but it is how late in the race, how deep in the race it is, and the accumulated fatigue at that particular point, and the sheer pace, the ferocity of the tempo that's set up there. And I know in the dry, we've seen over the last couple of years, they hit those climbs and the hairpins on the uphill section of that climb so fast that quite often the riders actually have to feather the brakes going on the uphill sections, and that just indicates how quick they're going on that climb.
Yeah, exactly that. And yeah, this is going to be a really exciting finish. I hope there's no accidents, and you know, it played out well, but everybody knows that when they start in Milan, there is a crucial point where you have to be in front. If you're not in front there, gaps starting to appear, and it's just the sheer speed. As you said, there's freewheeling around some of the hairpins and the corners, and it's just the sheer speed, and then you're onto the descent, then you're back onto the coast road, and then you hit the Poggio again. Again, it's all about positioning, and every team will want to position their riders towards the front as much as possible, and then throw into the mix riders that have been told, you have to attack here, you have to make it hard. But yeah, again, no matter if it's wet or dry, there's always around about 20-30 riders come to the finish. And Paolini was a massive help for Christophe over the last couple of years. He's not here. He's not a teammate anymore of Christophe, so I think Christophe may miss him. But you know, looking at recent results, you have to say, you know, the favourites of today are, you know, Cancellara, Sagan, Van Avermaet with his win in Tirreno, and really Matthews has to be a real favourite, who's up there last year in the sprint. Another year learned. He looks as if he's on some scintillating form in Paris-Nice with 2 stage wins, and I would say he is the big favourite for us because he can get over these climbs, he can sprint well, so we just have to kind of wait and see what happens.
No, I definitely agree with your selections there. They are some of the out-and-out favourites, but a couple of riders I think that we should talk about a little bit. The French duo, Nacer Bouhanni, had a couple of wins already this year. Took that stage victory, well, took 2 stage wins in Paris-Nice. One, of course, he was disqualified from after clashing with the aforementioned Michael Matthews. Bouhanni looking very, very dangerous indeed. 6th in this race last year. In fact, out of the top 10, all apart from John Degenkolb, the last year's champion, who, as we know, is out through injury, 9 of the top 10 are all riding. Nacer Bouhanni was 6th. Edvald Boasson Hagen last year with 10th, but I think he's in far better form than the shape he was in last year, without a shadow of a doubt. Arnaud Démare, the other Frenchman, again had almost an anonymous year last year, but came out fighting in Paris-Nice and took a very, very good stage win on a pretty tough stage of Paris-Nice when they went on those white roads with several nasty climbs near the back end. But there is Fabien Cancellara on that bespoke new Trek, looking very, very comfortable, looking so powerful, looking pretty lean as well, as we saw him eating up the climbs in Tirreno Adriatico. He did look extremely good. But as we know, Cancellara on his day he doesn't need to go long, although his preferred method is to win alone. He can sprint very, very well from a small group as well when he's on form, if he times it right.
He's already proven how strong he is at sprinting over this distance with these Palmares over the last few years in this race. So, you know, he won't be far away today. It's a big difference sprinting after 300 kilometres than 200 kilometres. That's where I think maybe Bouhanni might be not as strong as maybe some of the riders like Christophe. And Christophe, he admits he's not the fastest rider in the peloton, but it's his strength at the end of 300 kilometres that makes the difference.
Definitely. The sprinter's legs certainly deadened by the accumulation of fatigue over the 300 kilometres that the riders will be facing today. Remember, 291 kilometres was the original distance, but the race has been diverted.
Ça fait toujours quelque chose, même si on y a aussi découvert une facette assez étonnante de celui qui est peut-être considéré comme le grand favori aujourd'hui. On en reparlera tout à l'heure, mais je veux parler de Matthews. Matthews était aussi dans cette chute, et si vous vous souvenez bien, il avait 3 côtes cassées et il a rejoint Paris au caractère quand même.
Ah ouais, c'est dur.
C'est insolite. En plus, vous pouvez aisément nous parler de ce Matthews. Je rappelle, 7 jours de course, c'est le record. Ouais. En plus petit nombre, 5 jours en jaune, 2 victoires d'étape. Un de ses directeurs sportifs, vous le connaissez bien, c'est Lorenzo Lapage, évidemment.
Qui a beaucoup de mérite. Hein. Il fait vraiment beaucoup de travail dans l'ombre et tout. Et pour le moral, c'est quand même
un homme sous-estimé.
Sous-estimé. Voilà,
ouais, on
parle rarement de Lorenzo Lapage, ouais. Mais c'est un grand directeur sportif, croyez-moi. Qui est bien organisé, et qui connaît son métier à la perfection.
Et qu'est-ce qu'il dit, Lorenzo Lapage, de Matthews, puisque Matthews c'est quand même le profil du vainqueur, puisque de tous les sprinters c'est celui qui grimpe le mieux. C'est quand même l'idéal.
Oui. Ouais, Christophe n'est pas beaucoup moins. Mais Lorenzo dit qu'il ne connaît pas encore toutes les possibilités de Matthews. Il dit c'est un type qui a tellement de possibilités que
on ne connaît pas encore ses limites.
On ne connaît pas encore ses limites, exactement.
D'accord. En tout cas, on sera attentif à lui. Très certainement, qui avait avant ce matin 1124 km dans les jambes. Je sais que ça vous fait rire. Il adore l'Italie. Il vit à Monaco, hein, donc ici toute la Riviera, ce sont ses sorties d'entraînement évidemment. Il adore l'Italie. Il s'est marié à Florence. Ça doit donc être un grand romantique. Ouais, hein. Ouais. Il y passe ses vacances. Il aime la culture italienne. Et alors, il y a une histoire quand même qui est assez amusante. Il se connaît bien, lui et Sagan, qui pourraient jouer la gagne tout à l'heure, entre autres. Ils se connaissent bien par leur épouse interposée, qui sont toutes les deux slovaques, s'appellent toutes les deux Katarina.
Ah bon.
Et oui, il y a 4 et 4, hein, donc on peut le dire comme ça. Et il l'a rencontré, comme quoi le cyclisme est quelque chose de tout à fait merveilleux au sommet du Coberg, dans l'Amstel Gold Race, puisque la future Madame Matthews, à l'époque, travaillait comme représentante pour une marque de cycle que je ne citerai pas, puisqu'on ne prend pas la publicité gratuite sur la RTBF quand ça n'est pas nécessaire et que les impératifs de la course ne nous y contraignent pas. Donc voilà, Bling, c'est son surnom, qui vient d'une motocross aussi, entre 5 et 15 ans, poussé par son papa. Ça peut aider aussi, sans du pilotage, hein, on est bien d'accord.
C'est des gens qui n'ont pas envie de peur aux yeux. Hein. Toujours des kamikazes. Hein.
Mais est-ce qu'un coureur comme Matthews ne va pas devoir faire un choix à un moment donné? Imaginons dans le Poggio, comme vous le faisiez si bien, à 200-300 mètres du sommet, une attaque de Stibar et de Van Avermaet. Ah, chute, la première chute. C'est à l'arrière du peloton et il y a un coureur de l'équipe Yam qui est touché là, c'est Smokul, non?
Un coup de...
Oui, ici. Avec Vermont qui est touché. Sarah Motins, ça c'est le coureur de l'équipe Yam. On va mieux revoir maintenant, Eddy.
Oui.
À l'arrière du peloton.
Lotissement un peu là.
Un rétrécissement.
Ouais, mais c'est au milieu du peloton. Hein.
Oui,
enfin, à l'arrière.
Apparemment, c'est quand même Vermont qui est le premier à être tombé. Le voici, Vermont. Et l'autre coureur qui est tombé, c'est le Français Planète de l'équipe novo-nordiste. Charles Planète. Donc, victime d'une chute. Je disais juste à ce moment-là, Van Avermaet, Stibar attaque à 300 mètres de la ligne. Matthews, à ce moment-là, devra faire un choix. Est-ce que je vais avec ou est-ce que je reste en retrait pour garder des forces pour mon sprint?
À 300 mètres du sommet, il faut y aller. Il faut y aller. Il ne faut pas prendre le risque de laisser partir deux coureurs comme Stibar et Van Avermaet dans la descente du Poggio. Hein. Ça, c'est...
Up these three small climbs as we pass through Alassio.
Yeah, it's starting to hot up. As you said, it's a very nervous race. Everybody anticipating what's coming up. 11 riders in front as we pass Alassio. The gap coming down very quickly now. Bagdonis is there from AG2R. Maestri of Bardiana, Svetkov of Androni, Barta of Bora, Kurek of CCC. And Kluger of IAM, Bono of Lamprey, Conti of Southeast, Terlingi of Lotto NL Jumbo, Perron of Novo Nordist and Colidan of Trek. So 5 Italians in this 11-man breakaway.
Yeah, 5 of the teams in the front are World Tour teams. As you pointed out earlier on, for the first time, the gap has now come down to under 3 minutes. 2 minutes 54 is the gap. Really eating into this lead, the peloton now. For the group in front, they'll try and stay away for as long as they can. And I'd imagine that 1 or 2 riders from that group, if they're feeling particularly fresh and feisty, may try and go solo to maybe crest the Cipressa alone, but that's going to be a very big ask because the speeds will only increase. At the moment, we've got effectively 3 or 4 teams, I think, riding on the front. Dimension Data being one of them. Tinkoff, also one of the teams riding hard at the front, and Ethics Quickstep also there. But remember, at the moment, teams only putting 1 rider at the front. And Brian, we talked about the making sure you measure your effort. It's not just the riders individually, but it's about a team also using its resources effectively and strategically, isn't it? So just putting the guys at the front at the right particular time. There's no point in spending your troops too early, because resources in this race, especially around a protected leader, absolutely vital.
It is, and that's why Vermont was involved with that incident a little bit earlier. He'll be needed. There's already a pre-plan for what his job is, so he'll have to get towards the front of this peloton as quickly as possible, because we are coming into Laguilia next, and then we'll hit the Capamili, and you know, the climbs start and the pace goes up, and you have to be in the front, and that's why at the front of the bunch you can see there were 5 teams riding: Orica, Dimension Data, Ethics, Tinkoff and Cofidis, but they're kind of starting to get swamped now from other teams. They don't want to ride on the front, they just want to be at the front, and that's where the danger lies, and everybody gets slightly nervous as we get further along this coast.
Well, many riders will, of course, know this course very, very well. The parkour hardly really changes. The running generally the same.
The thing is, Matt, there's still a lot of teams base themselves, especially after Paris-Nice, they'll base themselves in this area and
been out, yeah.
look at the routes, do recons, and you think, well, you rode it last year, you rode it the year before, but it's just to refresh your memory, because you can't remember all the all the stages, all the races that you ride. So it's good to just give them a bit of refreshment.
And as you say though, Brian, as we see the arrowhead formation on the front, the pace really starting to lift now. Definite difference in shape of the peloton. Dimension data moving up on the left-hand side in that new white livery of theirs for the 2016 season. Still Manuel Boara. The Italian, remarkably good time trialist, vital component part of the Tinkoff squad, looking after only one rider. Their team is all about one, but in the form of number 1, Peter Sagan. And as we pass through La Gueglia, there is actually a race in La Gueglia at the back end of the season. Or was it the early part of the season? The start of the season. No, it was one end, bookending the year, the Trophy La Gueglia. But a team that we haven't talked too much about. We've seen them put one of their troops on the front in the form of the enormous Stein Vandenberg, Ethics Quick Step. You know, we talk about Fernando Gaviria. Many of the bookies 16-1, but a debutant at this level. Does he have the ability to win this race? I mean, that performance in Tirreno Adriatico where he put away Caleb Ewan, both of those two young riders, stars of the future in terms of sprinting. So exciting to watch. But the gap they put between themselves and the rest on that little uphill finish, impressive. Even more impressive when Gaviria actually sprinted on the hoods. Imagine if he got a little bit more aerodynamic. But realistically, do you think Gaviria has a chance? They've got other options, of course. Zdenek Stybar is going really well. Tom Bonin, we've not even mentioned him. If he gets to the finish, you never know. But I don't know if his form is that good. But what about the young Fernando Gaviria for you?
Oh, he's such a talent, and in fact, credit to Cavendish. He actually said, you know, he's the favourite for that stage and that type of sprint. So, yeah, he's a super talent. Won the Omnium in the World Championships in London. The question is, how will he sprint? Because he's so rapid. How will he sprint after 300 kilometres? This is a nice Milan-San Remo for him. He could be in the mix. He could be there. But on the stage that Van Avermaet won in Tirreno, he was in that front group and got, you know, dropped in the last kind of climb. So looking at the form guide, I think the speed they're going to go over the Cipressa and Poggio towards the end, I think, and especially at this distance, they're going to be a little bit too much. Do I think he can win this in the past, in the future? 100% definite. But it's great to see these young talents come through. You know, we've seen, you know, Cavendish dominate the sprints in the past, and you know, as far as a cycling fan's concerned, I don't like to see domination. I like to see, you know, other people coming in, and you know, we've got some great young riders coming through. Yesterday we saw another sprinter coming through in the Hands Down Classic, so it's great to see Caleb Ewan and Gaviria battling it out. So you know, I'm all for this, but Bonin, I think, will use his experience. Stybar, I think he has to attack the Poggio.
Just under 53 kilometres to go. We're getting into the business end of Milan-San Remo 2016 now. The gap to our 11 leaders out in front is 2 minutes and 18 seconds. That's the figure of Jan Barter, the Czech rider. Another crash at the back of the peloton. Very nervy times now. One of the riders of Lampre Merida looks pretty well in a bad way on the floor there. Can't quite pick out his number. A couple of riders from AG2 are also caught up in the turmoil. This just shows how nervy things are.
Just look at the wing mirror in that car. That's all it is, and the scrapes along the side of the car. It's like the sports directors are and behind saying, move up, and obviously you're moving up in the left-hand side, clip a wing mirror and hit the car, down you come.
Exactly, it does look like it might be Sasha Modolo. The rapid finisher will get confirmation of that. Look at the front wheel there. Absolute, well, crushed. And I think, as you say, Brian, looks like somebody has maybe clipped a wing mirror of a car and caused a ripple effect to within the middle of the peloton. And a couple of riders there from Cannondale also down. So very unfortunate, but this does happen as things get very nervous. It is number 148, in fact. It's Federico Zerlo, so it's not Modelo. Federico Zerlo, unfortunately, will be out of the race. A big shame for the Lampre Merida team. They've got some very, very strong riders in that roster. Diego Ulissi, extremely strong. He'll need to win from a very small group, but may attack on the climb. They've also got David Chimolai, who was 8th last year. And, of course, Sasha Modelo himself, a very, very good sprinter indeed. But we're on the first of the 3 small climbs that come before the Cipressa and the Poggio. We're on the Capo Mele now. This short, sharp climb in only a few kilometres' time from the of this climb. They'll descend and go straight up the Capo Servo before then ascending the Capo Berta at 38.7 kilometres. So the pace really starting to lift now, and it's still Thompson of Dimension Data on the front.
The thing is, you'll hear these crashes behind, you know, the scrape of metal and the bangs. And
it's a horrible sound, isn't it?
Yeah, and it just increases the nerves. You don't want them. You want them to relax, but when you get everybody, sports director saying, look, guys, you need to move to the front and move to the front, and keep on, you know, shouting at them to be able to do that, because they know how important it is. You get these compressions and all of a sudden you start hearing crashes behind, and it just creates this nervousness in the whole peloton, and everybody wants to ride in the front. And when you're in the front, you want to try and save as much energy as possible, because predominantly along this coast today there is a bit of a prevailing kind of headwind, and for the riders riding at the front, they'll actually feel it, and you know, they'll slowly sap their energy, and you need as many riders towards this crucial point, the red point of 27.1 kilometres to go into the Cipressa.
Or Cannondale now on the front, driving hard. They've got a very interesting roster of riders. It's worth giving a mention, I think, to Simon Clark, who moved across from Orica Green Edge. He's one of my outside bets for this race. He's had a great start to the season. He's already got a win on the score sheet. And when you look back at his Palmares, he's matured ever so gradually over the last few years. A really steady progression in terms of building strength as a rider. Wore the pink jersey in the Giro last year. He's finished top 10 in the World Road Championships. And I think with the pressure, so Clarkey for me, a good outsider.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why they're putting riders on the fronts. They want to up the tempo, keep their riders towards the front as much as possible. We have got pretty much a majority of the peloton. The only non-starter, I believe, was Hofland, Moreno Hofland of Lotto NL Jumbo. We've lost a couple of riders due to a couple of crashes. I think Zurlo doesn't look as if he'll get back to the race, but predominantly we have most of the riders still in this race today with 50 k's to go.
We certainly do. 50 k's to go, and the descent of the Capo Mele for the riders in front, and that's the 11 breakaways. The lead approaching 10 minutes very early in the race. There's a couple of riders now trying to get back in contact.
Bacalan's on the far side, and Bacalan's is the leader. He's riding fairly well. He's in that group.
He's in good form this year. Bacalan's already had a win. He is a protected rider. But we're just talking about, I mean, Brian, explain, especially given how long this race is, we talk about how important it is to measure your effort, not expend any energy. Normally in a race of 160, 200 kilometres, if you have a puncture or a mechanical and you drop back, really the kind of impact it will have on you in the overall outcome of the race is negligible. But making an effort like that in Milan-San Remo could have a real detrimental effect, because you just want to save as much as you can until that critical point in the race.
But sometimes with crashes and these other things, and you get nervous, and that's where a good sports director comes in. He just keeps the riders so calm, no panic. Make sure you're eating and drinking, make sure you're doing this and doing this. Some riders like it. Some riders like a sports director behind shouting at them, do this, do that. Other riders like a sports director not to shout them, to encourage them. Just say to them, look, you need to do this. You know, not that you have to do this, and different sports directors manage their teams in different ways, and it's all about keeping the riders as calm as possible and saving as much energy as possible, and it's experience of being in the front at the right time.
It certainly is. Many riders chasing to get back in contact, and meanwhile, our latest time gap, the lead has really tumbled now, 1 minute and 38 seconds.
This is Agnoli trying to get back on, looks like, and looks as if he's changed his bike, so it's a bike change for him. Probably involved with a crash or a compression. Sometimes when you get compressions like this, you get you know, the gear hangers or anything like that kind of ripped off the bikes, but he obviously doesn't want the TV camera there with his team car just behind him.
Certainly not. The tooting of the horns, a couple of riders from Lotto and Ayumba just coming back down the line, but meanwhile up ahead is our breakaway, Jan Barta of Bora Argon 18, 31-year-old Czech. Great time trialist, is the national champion of the time trial of the Czech Republic. Always eager to get in breakaways, and a real vital component part of every move. Imagine if you get in a move with him, you'll know he's going to really assist in the pacemaking. But Lotto Soudal in red now moving up near the front, and they've got Tony Galopin in their number, top 10 last year. Well, 47.8 kilometres to go, and still riders who caught up in those earlier crashes on the Capo Mele trying to make their way back to the peloton. This is Edrin Hoskis of Poland. Finally just makes contact with the back end of the bunch. That'll be a relief for him, but at what cost? A furious chase back through the race convoy. But as you say, making your way back through the convoy, Brian, you know, it's about the kind of the spirit and the confidence that's instilled by the director sportif. It's about not panicking, because at this stage of the race, if you put yourself into the red, you've got the adrenaline flowing as well. It's all about being as composed as you can, because things do happen. You get race leaders taken out of the race or having mechanicals, but again, it's all about panicking, using the convoy. There's still a fair distance to go, but again, the conservation of energy, absolutely vital. But again, it is a skill, because some riders panic, others have this innate ability to just relax regardless of the situation and just make their way naturally back through to the bunch.
Yeah, they certainly will. Looking at the effort now on the left-hand side from Lotto Soudal, that's Adam Hansen, the Australian at the front, and another effort from the Australian team, Orica Green Edge, on the right-hand side. But looking at Lotto Soudal, they've got the Bucherer here, Tony Galopin, who showed some good form in Paris-Nice. Adam Hansen is riding on the front. Pim Lichtar, Jürgen Rollins, Marcel Seberg, Van Andert and Lars Bach. So they're looking to maybe try and make it a little bit harder, because I don't think they've got a fast enough rider to beat the likes of, Sagan and they types, so, and Christoph. So that's why they're riding on the front, keeping the kind of tempo high, and again, it's all about positioning, and I would think that they would be a team looking for options in the suppressing Poggio.
Definitely. Well, I think the fastest rider in their number is Jens de Bucherer, but the former Belgian road champion. But as I say, I think the race at the back end could be a little bit too ferocious for him. So all the troops on the front, no doubt looking after Tony Galopin, who was 9th in this race last year and rode well at the back end of Paris-Nice, a real protagonist on the final stage, helping Geraint Thomas, or assisting Geraint Thomas in the chase to get him back on terms with an absolutely rampaging Alberto Contador. A fantastic race, Paris-Nice, but Galopin definitely in good form.
The thing is, we can look at the form guide. You look at Paris-Nice and Tirreno Adriatico, and you see where the Milan-San Remo winners come from. And it was predominantly Tirreno before, and then you had some from Paris-Nice. But I think the cancel stage in Tirreno has helped the riders from Tirreno Adriatico, because it's meant that a lot of the riders in Tirreno haven't come out at kind of on their knees, because Tirreno is a hard race, and to finish the race only a few days before Milan-San Remo, over almost 300 kilometres, you have to recover quickly, and I think that cancel stage means that there's a little bit more zip in the legs of some of the riders coming out of Tirreno.
I suppose when you look at it, there's a stage cancelled in Paris and a stage cancelled in Tirreno, so in terms of distance covered, it's pretty much even Stevens, but I know there were numerous riders, including Fabian Cancellara. Not so much Vincenzo Nibali. I can understand why he was disappointed the stage was cancelled, but I still think the right decision was definitely made by the organisers, RCS. But it meant that the riders didn't race in cold conditions. I mean, when you're racing in the cold, your immune system is put to the test, especially riding mountains in the cold. And remember, the stage in Tirreno wasn't just about the mountaintop finish. There were several climbs that went above 800 metres throughout the day before the finishing climb, and that's one of the reasons that they cancelled the stage, was the risk of ice and snow above 800 metres in general, not just the finishing climb. But that's in the past now. But I think all the riders from Paris and all the riders from Tirreno, it's difficult to split the two now and difficult to distinguish which is the better preparation. As we see Valerio Agnoli just moving up the outside. He's had a very difficult chase to get back in contact. Finally gets onto the coattails of the peloton. The fun will be able to take a breath. But 1 minute and 32 is the lead now for our 11 riders out in front. They've descended the Capo Servo. The next climb, or the next short climb of this trio of climbs towards the back end of Milan-San Remo, will be the Capo Berta. They'll crest that at 38.7 kilometres to go. Then we have some flat, and then we ascend the legendary Cipressa, and then the Poggio on the...
Ça peut jouer dans l'avantage du leader de l'équipe. Hein. Peut-être d'avoir une échappée avec un ou deux équipiers, si vraiment l'équipe est très très forte. C'est ce que j'ai eu en 71 avec Bruyère et Joseph Sprout. Dans l'échappée, c'est quand même un avantage inouï.
Et
roule, hein.
Les deux derniers coureurs qui ont réussi à gagner Milan-San Remo en attaquant avant le Poggio, je ne parle pas du cas de Gomez qui lui était parti dans l'échappée matinale, c'est Bugno en 1991, qui était parti avec Canzonieri dans la Cipressa, et c'est vous, la dernière fois, avec Jean-Luc Van den Broek,
parti avant le Poggio.
1976, il y a 40 ans, donc jour pour jour, vous vous retrouvez dans un groupe où il y a Rick Van Linden, Patrick Sercu, Walter Godefroot, Freddy Martens, Walter Plorkart, Luc Le Mans, tous les meilleurs sprinters de l'époque. Vous dites, vous qui n'avez jamais perdu un sprint sur la Via Rome, vous dites, si j'arrive avec eux, là, je ne vais pas y arriver. Donc vous attaquez combien? 4 fois avant le Poggio, pour enfin, et alors ils se disent, ouais, merci, il va coincer, il est devenu vieux, il n'y croit pas quand vous partez. Et vous y allez. Est-ce qu'on peut encore réussir ça aujourd'hui, objectivement?
Pourquoi pas?
Mais plus personne n'essaye. Nibali, peut-être. Le seul, c'est Nibali qui essaye. C'est le seul qui essaie de partir avant.
Van Avermaet va essayer dans le Poggio aussi. Hein.
Mais si, je parlais avant le Poggio. C'est ça quand même. Et cette année-là, vous égalez le record donc, de Girardengo, Costante Girardengo.
Non, je le bats.
Ah oui, c'est en 75 que vous l'égalez, en 76 vous le battez, mais ce que je voulais dire, c'est que on compare ce qui est comparable, puisque Girardengo, lui, il a gagné 6 fois la Primavera, mais en 17 participations. Et lui, il a un monument à sa mémoire au sommet du Capo Berta qu'on verra dans quelques instants. Colbrelli a des équipiers, a des supporters. Il a des équipiers aussi, notamment un devant. Betancourt qui fait son travail dans l'équipe de Valverde.
Pour remonter le peloton maintenant, c'est pas évident. Hein. Peria ici. Non, c'est pas... Oui,
non, pas encore.
Non, pas encore. Non.
Peria, ce sera après le Capo Berta.
Oui. C'est le même...
Mais ça ressemble, oui.
C'est le même rond-point, oui.
Peria, c'est plus un entonnoir.
Oui.
Mais vous le voyez, vous n'aviez jamais une vue d'hélicoptère, vous voulez dire.
Non, le peloton est en file indienne. Hein. C'est un nouveau rond-point qu'il y a là. Il n'existait pas avant.
On va aller chercher le Capo Berta. Moi, je propose de passer notre dernière page de pub.
Oui,
hein.
très bien.
Si vous êtes prêts à Bruxelles, pour qu'on puisse vivre la fin de cette étape, de cette course classique en intégralité. On se retrouve juste après ces quelques messages. Merci d'être avec nous.
Welcome back. Just over 41 Ks to go now. in the 2016 edition of Milan-San Remo. The lead to our 11 leaders, and there they are, is tumbling all the time. Two of the small climbs have already gone. The Capo Mele, the Capo Cerro have gone. We've still got the Capo Berta still to come, and that comes with 38.7 kilometers to go. So very shortly, the breakaway will be on that climb, closely followed by a chasing bunch, which at the present time is being led by Tinkoff and Lotto Soudal. But we're just going through some of the favourites, some of the outsiders for this race. What do you think of Valverde's chances today? It's difficult. Lobato is their fastest sprinter. They've also got Rojas, who is pretty good. But Valverde's chances today, what do you think, Brian?
Look, it depends on how the other teams ride. If we're on Poggio and Valverde, Nibali, maybe 2 or 3 other riders go together, yeah, there's a possibility a small group can come to the finish, because that's where Valverde can possibly win. But I don't think that's going to happen. It has to be really hard. The thing is, it's the speed that they got up the Poggio. It's very hard to get a big gap. You're going to have to see Valverde and these riders attack pretty much in the first kilometre of the Poggio to get enough gap. So I think it'll come back together. I think you're right. Lobato is possibly their man today. They have to have numbers there to be able to help him. But I think, you know, from seeing the pictures here, you can see Betancourt for Movistar riding at the back. I think he's just looking at maybe at the racing kilometres. But they are the UCI's #1 team. You know, respect to that. They have been over the last couple of years. And Valverde, I think, will be there looking after the likes of Lobato, making sure he gets over the Cipressa and the Poggio in a good position. Potentially, he's looked good this year already with a good win in the Dubai Tour up the dam.
Definitely. As we see Emanuele Boaro, I think his job was done. He spent a lot of time on the front driving this bunch along, and you can just see the slight inclines of this climb, the Capo Berta. Nothing too much to worry about, but again, it will sap the strength from the legs. It will really start to bite. So different when you hit a climb in a primarily flat race. You're used to racing flat out on the flat, very, very fast, and you get that nervous feeling in your stomach when you hit a climb. These conditions are better. It's even worse. It's amplified when the weather is cold and your legs feel like big pieces of wood. But this little climb will hurt. Remember, very deep into the race now. 300 kilometers the total distance today when you factor in the addition of the deviation because of the rockfall at 130 kilometers around Valtteri, where the riders had to deviate. So a very, very long day in the saddle. We'll be approaching 7 hours when we cross the line. And still Tinkoff, and there's Tosato on the front for them. And Orica Green Edge also riding very hard. And nearly a minute now to the leaders, so this lead now really, really coming down, Brian.
Yeah, Orica had Jo Jensen at the front, their new signing from last year. Just the compressions at the back and it's kind of stop-start. This is probably the hardest of the capos. You can see the breakaway starting to slow down. Colidan knows what his job is today. He has to keep the pressure on. The longer he's in front, the easier it is for his teammates to just kind of sit in the wheels. But the closer we get to this crunch point, the right-hander up the Cipressa, then that gets thrown out the window because, you know, Cancellara has to be looked after by his teammates to get a good position into that right-hand corner.
He certainly does. And again, Trek Segafredo have an extremely strong squad. Cancellara, the out-and-out favourite for their team. But should it come down to a sprint, although over this distance, Cancellara himself can certainly sprint extremely effectively. You have to look at Nicolo Bonifacio, I say his name because it was painted all over the wall in a big mural. But there's the world road champion, Peter Sagan of Tinkoff. What can he do today? He's won the World Road Championships, of course. He is the current champion. Never won a monument. Could this be his day?
Well, the thing is, Matt, they're doing a very good job, but they are expending a bit of energy with some of the riders, but they know that some of these riders will not be any use on the Cipressa or the Poggio, so you need to use them up now. And we saw also there Tosato was leading the way. He's probably going to do a job to the Cipressa. Adam Blythe is also in the ranks of the Tinkoff team, but just as the pressure starts to be applied, we've already just over 6 hours of racing, and you can see some of the riders starting to struggle at the back of the peloton.
One of those was Carlos Betancourt at the back. He's struggled with his weight over the years. He's come across to Movistar. Yet to see him really perform yet, but now the pressure really starting to tell on the break. The riders in the breakaway there. Bagdonosov, AG2R, looking like he was starting to struggle, just losing the wheel in front, forcing Roger Kluge to go round him. The Tifosi at the side of the road absolutely love this race, and still the pressure is applied. The veteran on the right-hand side, Tosato, looking very, very good indeed. Jempi Drucker on the front there for BMC.
Well, this is making it a lot easier. When you've got teammates like that, like BMC, the third rider in the BMC colours in the red and the black is in fact Greg Van Avermaet. You can see Tinkoff in the fluorescent yellow looking after the world champion. It's so easy when your teammates are riding at the front, and they can relax somewhat on the Capoberta and relax in the run up to the suppressor. But obviously it's using up your teammates, but we've seen this before. Van Avermaet and especially Peter Sagan are good at looking after themselves. They don't need too many teammates, but in the end I think they will, but they want it to be hard. Van Avermaet riding third wheel on the left hand side for BMC, the world champion right up there. They want it difficult. They don't want to come to the finish with the likes of Christoph and these other kind of sprinters, so they want to make it difficult.
Definitely, that's why we're seeing BMC. Really good point there, Brian. BMC really riding hard on the front. They've slashed another 20 seconds from the lead of our 11 breakaways. 44 seconds they have as they descend the Capoberta. Next up on the menu is the Cipressa.
Un caro saluto amici di Imperia, i corridori stanno salendo Capoberta.
21.5 kilometers to go, and then we have the legendary Boggio at 5.5 kilometers to go, then the plummet down, and then it's just 2 kilometers to the finish line on the Via Roma. It is going to be a spectacular finale, that is for sure. Tinkoff still drive it on the right-hand side. I can just see tucked in behind, haven't touched the front yet. Good tactics employed by Team Sky. Geraint Thomas to the fore, Peter Kenyak as well in the white jersey of British road champion. I've also seen Luke Rowe there, Mikhail Kwiatkowski, the former world road champion. He's looking good. So Team Sky, another team we haven't talked too much about, but real depth in strength, giving them...
On attend un leader qui est retardé. Il y a parfois des attaques, des contres. Il y a un léger faux plat d'ailleurs montant à la sortie d'Imperia jusqu'au pied de la Cipressa, que vous connaissez bien.
Ah ouais, c'est là que
vous êtes parti.
C'est parti avec Poulidor pour jouer.
Donc, on peut aussi profiter de ça. Si on n'est pas peut-être le gars qui peut faire la différence sur les pourcentages les plus importants de la Cipressa, puisque hors Turquino, qu'on ne voit jamais à la télévision, c'est dans la Cipressa qu'on a les pourcentages les plus élevés de cette finale. Hein. Et puis à la longueur, c'est plus de 5,5 km d'ascension, la Cipressa, qui existe depuis 1982. Et alors on parle toujours de la montée, mais la descente de la Cipressa, on a déjà vu dans le passé des Nibali, des Gilbert
de chutes, hein,
aussi tenter leur chance.
Il y a eu pas mal de chutes déjà.
C'est une descente, vous auriez bien aimé. Très technique. Voilà justement la cuvette de passage traditionnelle ici dans Imperia, très étroit avec ces bâtiments.
Font la fontaine.
Pas souvent de soleil ici, hein?
Non. N'oublie pas d'avoir un coup de soleil.
Coup de soleil, non. Imperia. Et puis on va à San Lorenzo al Mare. Les deux localités se jouxtent en quelque sorte. Là où Bugno avait attaqué en 1990. Et c'est vrai qu'ici, à force de revenir toujours systématiquement sur... très important. Hein.
Oui, sûrement.
Et cette fois, c'est Conti qui est repris après Kourek. Deuxième coureur de l'échappée matinale repris. Sur les 10 derniers Milan-San Remo, 7 se sont terminés au sprint. On a vu des solos, il y a eu Schmil, il y a eu Pozzato qui a juste devancé, il y a eu Cancellara, il y avait un très joli coup aussi ici en 2008. On rappelle que le tracé a été amputé de la manie, on a essayé de mettre la manie, de durcir, mais les organisateurs sont revenus là-dessus. La course, on sait qu'elle est longue, elle est rapide, elle rentre dans sa phase nerveuse. Et vu la météo, certains espèrent, oui, champion du monde à Zolder, lui, chez les espoirs.
Il y a longtemps. Il y a longtemps.
Quelques heures avant Cipollini.
Oui.
Kiki. Ce qui est évidemment très difficile aussi pour des gars comme Van Avermaet, Christophe, Sagan et tous les autres, c'est que cette course est longue, mais l'attente est longue, parce qu'il faut attendre pratiquement pendant 275 km avant de pouvoir y aller.
Ah ouais, l'attaque du
Coledan. Et le stress augmente, hein. Augmente depuis Cialinghi qui revient dans sa position caractéristique, bien aplati sur sa machine. On voit le moment où Coledan attaque dans le dos de Bono. Cialinghi l'a vu, donc c'est lui qui fait l'effort. Normalement, Bono, sur ce qu'il a montré, doit pouvoir avoir les jambes pour aller aussi. C'était l'impression qu'on avait que c'était les trois plus costauds. Mais ça, c'est bien vu parce que ça permet à l'équipe de Cancellara de rester, de ne pas se dévoiler. Et nouvelle chute. Nouvelle chute avec un équipier de Christophe et un Cannondale. Je me demande d'ailleurs si c'est pas Slachter qui est là. Non. Non. C'est Marangoni. Marangoni. Et là. Ah oui, c'est Haller. Attention, Haller, c'est un des... En l'absence de Paolini, pour les raisons qu'on sait qu'il n'est plus là et qui avait été très important dans le succès il y a 2 ans de Christophe, Haller et Guarnieri étaient les 2 coureurs peut-être les plus précieux pour amener Christophe. Donc Christophe perd quand même un de ses lieutenants là.
Ah, mais ça, je pense pas qu'il va revenir. Hein.
Ah non. Voilà Barta. Barta avec dans sa roue Maestri. Donc avec toutes ces chutes, on avait quitté le contre de Coledan et de Cialinghi. Et de nouveau un équipier avec Wyss, c'est le champion de Suisse, équipier de Van Avermaet en 2e position. Et nouvelle chute, et c'est Vermont, c'est sa 2e chute. Ah. Il fait signe, non, terminé, fini. Coureur précieux dans cette équipe. Ethics, Milan-San Remo fini pour Vermont. Malheureux, malchanceux. Mais pour le moment, 100% des chutes, Eddy, se passent à l'arrière.
Oui, c'est la fatigue un petit peu, et puis les voitures peut-être mal parquées, les cars.
On va revoir. Fraîcheur, concentration, Eddy. Malchance, un peu de tout. Hein.
Oui.
J'espère pour Vermont que ça n'est pas trop grave et que la suite de son printemps ne sera pas hypothéquée. Un équipier très précieux. Hein. Et on fait le point puisqu'ils ne sont plus que 6 sur les 11 avec Maestri qui emmène. Coledan est là, Barta, Bono comme je le pensais, Cialinghi. Et le dernier, ça c'est Bono. Bagdona s'est repris.
Oui.
Donc même si on ne l'a pas vu, en procédant par déduction, on pourrait imaginer que le dernier coureur, ce soit Klug, de chez Yam, probablement. Hein.
Oui.
Coureur formé sur la piste, on l'a dit.
Encore. Ouh là là,
ça passe tout près. Hein.
Ouh. Il y a les écarts, hein, ça va tomber. Hein. La fatigue commence à se faire sentir. Et puis les écarts, les coureurs qui se...
Les confirmations, Eddy, c'est bien Klug en dernière position. Donc le 6e homme, 6 sur les 11 échappés. Le grand Vandenberg qui est présent avec Sabatini pour l'équipe Ethics. L'équipe Katusha qui place aussi ça de loin. Il faut faire attention cette saison de loin. Entre Katusha et Cofidis, il peut y avoir, si on ne voit pas les bandes blanches devant de Katusha, on peut confondre.
En plus, l'auto aussi, c'est rouge.
Et l'auto, oui. L'auto BMC. C'est Wyss qui emmène. Et voilà cette sacrée fontaine, la fontaine sacrée.
Bon. Oui.
Ah oui. À 1 kilomètre de l'arrivée.
Ça ralentit un petit peu dans le peloton. Beaucoup, hein, pour arriver au pied de la Cipressa. Hein. Plus de 100 coureurs encore là.
Cialinghi qui cède le relais à Bono. Les chutes de nouveau. Caduta, c'est le mot qu'on entend le plus pour le moment.
Ouais, ouais.
Et voilà, et là c'est plus important, hein, quantitativement. Il y a un coureur là de l'équipe Dimension d'attaque qui est dos contre le mur, je n'aime pas ça. Il y a un Sky Kwiatkowski ou pas? Kinnock, il y a Kinnock, le champion de Grande-Bretagne, oui. Attention, parce que là, je ne suis pas sûr que ça s'est passé à
Il y a un coureur Orica, Greenwich.
Je ne suis pas sûr du tout que ça s'est passé à l'arrière, ça. Non. Et c'est Matthews. Matthews qui est reparti très vite. Il y a un coureur Cannondale qui est encore au sol. Pour le coureur de Dimension Data, c'est fini. Et là, il y a un Sky. Et le Sky est dit, c'est...
C'est tombé devant. Hein.
C'est devant. Au moment où je disais que ça se passait que derrière, comme quoi.
C'est devant.
C'est Cummings, le vainqueur d'étape à Mende, je crois. Le Dimension d'attaque qui est,
je vais dire,
couché.
Trop de coureurs dans le final. La course était trop facile et ça entraîne des chutes.
Enfin bon, Matthews manifestement impliqué, mais a pu repartir.
Ouais, mais quand même.
Et pour lui, c'est fini ici le Cannondale. Hein.
Tinkoff aussi.
Tinkoff, un équipier.
C'erano i primi 11 doti con netto distacco. Eccoli, eccoli.
Mamma, batti!
On va essayer de voir si Radio Tour nous donne des informations quant à... En attendant 32 secondes, parce qu'évidemment la chute ne fait absolument pas du tout freiner le peloton, loin de là.
Comme un coureur de Dimension.
Et vous avez vu, il y avait un numéro de carte 171, c'est celui de Matthews.
Oui.
Donc il n'a plus son...
Non.
Et regardez, c'est Van Mark qui est là dans la roue de Laser. Bien protégé, il est bien à l'approche de sa première Cipressa. La Baume aussi que l'on voit avec son maillot Astana. Klug, Cialinghi.
Il gruppo sta guadagnando ancora terreno nei confronti di quello che rimane del gruppetto degli attaccanti di giornata, ossia nei confronti di Maestro.
171.
Oui, et Benatti. Donc Mathieu s'est impliqué et c'est un équipier très précieux. C'est peut-être l'équipier le plus précieux de Sagan, Benatti. Un coup dur ça pour Sagan d'avoir perdu Benatti parce que ça veut dire qu'il ne lui reste plus que Gatto. Dans la perspective de la fin, hein, il a d'autres coureurs encore autour de lui. On voit au milieu les Cofidis qui viennent se mettre à côté des lotos néerlandais. Ça c'est Cummings qui est revenu, donc c'était pas Cummings qui était au sol chez Dimension Data. Valverde est bien placé. Voilà maintenant avec Geschke toute l'équipe Giant, avec notamment Whitens, le sprinter belge, qui a peut-être une carte à jouer. Vous savez qu'évidemment le vainqueur sortant d'Egenkolb a été victime d'un accident dramatique, hein, qui montre encore à quel point ce sport est dangereux. Ce sont 4 ou 5 coureurs de la formation qui ont été balancés à l'entraînement en Espagne. Donc Degenkolb n'est pas là. Dumoulin, forfait. Ben voilà, il y a Geschke dont on connaît. Peut-être plus jamais une situation comme ça.
Non, absolument. Non, parce que après, ce sera pour Degenkolb, pour Dumoulin.
Évidemment.
Évident. Voilà, puis là, c'est près ça.
On est parti pour 5 km 650 d'ascension à 4,1% avec un passage maximum à 9% après la moitié de l'ascension. Voilà Klug qui est le premier qui lâche. Ils ne sont plus qu'à 5 maintenant sous la conduite de Bono devant Koledan, Cialinghi, Maestri et Barta. Et ce sont les équipiers de Christophe. C'est intelligent. Il ne veut pas aller trop vite.
C'est Mathieu qui revient.
Mathieu qui n'a pas d'équipier. Oui, Mathieu tout seul. Et où sont ses équipiers? On n'aurait pas dû en demander à 2-3 de... Il a quand même l'oreillette. Mais oui, mais il va faire un gros effort, ça peut lui coûter cher. «
14 secondes.
Oui. Là, je suis quand même surpris qu'avec l'oreillette que chez Orica, quand on est le leader absolu, qu'il n'y ait pas 2 ou 3 coureurs qui patientent. Et...
On voit que c'est pas Lorenzo Lapage qui est directeur sportif.
Il y a les 3 coureurs, dont en 3e position Christophe, qui donc fait la course en tête. Van Avermaet est là, c'est le 2e BMC. C'est lui qui est dans la roue, je pense, de Damiano Caruso à confirmer. Et puis ben voilà, derrière, je vous répète, ce sont les...
Ils jouent malin, hein. Ils vont en tête faire un faux train pour qu'il n'y ait pas de démarrage.
Parce qu'en principe, c'est la difficulté qui convient le moins à Christophe. Pour que Christophe ne fasse pas des efforts inutiles, c'est bien vu. C'est bien vu.
C'est bien vu. Tactiquement, c'est bien vu.
Maintenant, je ne suis pas sûr qu'on va laisser faire. Hein, voilà, je suis pas sûr. Hein, ça. Et voilà. L'équipier de Nibali qui tente sa chance.
Oh, il est durci.
Avec Stannard qui se vient, lui qui a fait l'impasse sur sa course. Le circuit Nice-Blatt, il avait remporté les 2 années précédentes. Je crois qu'il y a aussi Vicioso, le petit format de l'équipe Katusha qui se trouve en 3e position. Et puis on a le grand Seberg. De nouveau 3 coureurs Katusha dont le 3e est certainement Christophe. Nibali avec Agnoli devant lui. Sagan n'est pas loin. Van Avermaet est très bien placé également. Et donc pour le moment, la surprise c'est Mathieu qui est la victime de la chute et qui fait sans équipier un gros effort pour essayer de revenir sur l'arrière du peloton. Ça risque de lui coûter quand même Milano-San Remo.
Oui, sûrement. Non, je pense que...
Vous n'y croyez plus?
Non.
Non, plus pour Matthews.
S'il n'est pas rentré maintenant dans le peloton, non. À moins qu'il était rentré avant le Cipressa, alors c'est possible. S'il n'est pas rentré, mais non, c'est...
J'imagine quand même qu'avec son statut de un des grands favoris, on l'aurait montré. Il y a une caméra à l'arrière du peloton, et dit donc c'est quand même une info importante. Le petit frère de Quintana qui se trouve là devant. D'ailleurs, Quintana, le premier des Movistar qui se trouve, je pense, en 6-7e position dans ce peloton. Et donc, deux équipiers de Nibali qui entourent un équipier de Sagan à 13 secondes de ce qu'il reste du groupe de 11. Bon, il n'y a même plus ça.
Non, ils sont encore Clou qui est revenu.
Oui, et ont été lâchés, c'est aussi la preuve hein, qu'ils sont bien légitimement fatigués. 280 km devant, pratiquement. 275, allez. Et voilà, gruppo compacto, comme on dit ici. Regroupement général.
Ouais, c'était à prévoir. Hein.
Regroupement général à 3 km 500 du sommet de la Cipressa. Sagan juste devant Boissonhagen, aux alentours de la 10e position, avec pour le moment, ouais, c'est plus rapide que ce que voulaient les Katusha, il dit. Beaucoup plus rapide.
On voit que les Katusha sont...
Geschke en 6e position, Kwiatkowski juste devant lui et Stannard qui emmène l'ancien champion du monde.
Oh.
Oui, et cette accélération des Astana va être fatale à Matthews, Eddy.
Oui.
Slachter, c'est le petit format de l'équipe Cannondale qui se trouve à gauche, le néerlandais Cancellara, que l'on voit bien là. Il vient se montrer très à l'aise dans la roue du champion du monde, juste devant Boissonhagen avec Valverde derrière. Nibali qui vient se frotter, qui vient remonter aussi. Et si Nibali attendait la descente pour tenter quelque chose, c'est possible aussi. Mais il n'y a plus d'Astana maintenant, hein. Il n'y a plus d'Astana qui roule. Il a ses supporters. Ça c'est Kreuziger, Eddy. C'est quand même pas n'importe qui.
Non. Il ne faudrait pas s'étonner d'avoir une...
Cavendish lâché.
Il ne faudrait pas s'attendre à une attaque de... Il ne faut pas s'étonner d'une attaque de Sagan dans la descente de la Cipressa.
Ah, intéressant. En tout cas, il est mis dans la roue de Van Avermaet. On a donc Kreuziger. Je voudrais confirmer, je crois que c'est Caruso. Kreuziger, Caruso, Van Avermaet, Sagan, Cancellara. Et ceux qu'on voit là en bas de l'image, ils s'accrochent au caractère, mais
ça devient
rupture.
Ça brûle.
Redze qui est lâché avec Barbine également. Encore un équipier en difficulté, c'est Bodnar, équipier de Sagan.
De ce gamin, encore beaucoup de coureurs. Hein. Ça va être difficile de sortir.
Derrière Cancellara, on a aussi Navardoskas, Galopin, Boissonhagen, Nibali. Et il y a le petit Brambilla qui remonte. Il m'a bien plu au Strade Bianche et attention, et à Tirreno, il est en grande forme.
Il a fait du fameux boulot. Hein.
Lui, il peut peut-être faire mal dans les derniers hectomètres de la Chine. Il est peut-être plutôt là pour placer Stibar. Stibar qu'on voit pour la première fois apparaître à droite. Et voilà maintenant un équipier de Valverde qui y va. Et il s'agit de Ventoso. Non, Visconti, pardon. Visconti, oui, le triple champion d'Italie contré par Stannard.
Stannard. Des rouleurs, ça. Hein.
Donc Visconti avec Stannard. Et ça c'est un contre ça? Et dit oui, hein, avec un Cannondale et un BMC. Ça, on est déjà dans la perspective du placement peut-être pour la descente.
Exactement, oui.
Et on se neutralise un petit peu. Stannard qui relaie. Attention, Stannard, il est habitué du coup. Hein, il avait déjà fait ça. Et dit, si vous vous souvenez, en 2013.
Il faudrait pas qu'ils attendent longtemps hein, pour réagir, car c'est des rouleurs. Hein.
Ouais, deux gabarits très différents, mais peut-être très complémentaires.
Encore une attaque.
Ouais, un équipier de Van Avermaet.
Ouais.
Des marquis à vérifier. Donc, Stannard et Visconti qui sont tout près du sommet de la Cipressa, qui se relaient bien, qui ont compris quel était leur intérêt.
On va vite. Hein. Visconti est facile. Hein.
Oui, on l'avait déjà vu à Tirreno d'ailleurs, hein, qu'il était plutôt bien. On n'a pas pu identifier le coureur BMC qui est en poursuite. Il y a encore l'auto qui sort là maintenant. Avec Selvaggi dans la roue.
Il y a quelques coureurs de nouveau de...
L'auto Katusha sont revenus, donc ça veut dire que Christophe est très bien. Et la Cipressa.
11 secondes. Hein.
C'est Visconti donc qui entame la redoutable descente devant.
Derrière ça coince. Rétréci et ça c'est des coureurs qui sont... Bon.
Et donc c'est encore l'équipe Lotto qui emmène devant, je pense, Brambilla et Stibar. Regardez ce rétrécissement, pied à terre pour beaucoup.
coureurs encore. Hein. 18 secondes, c'est... Je vais voir qui va rouler hein, en bas. Visconti est un grand descendeur. Hein.
C'est un coureur qui a fait top 20 des Tours d'Italie et d'Espagne l'année dernière. Hein.
Ouais.
Il y a les deux coureurs ETIX dans la roue du coureur Lotto et un quatrième coureur d'une équipe belge en 4e position. Là, vous voyez. Et on n'a aucune nouvelle de Matthews.
Non, mais d'après moi, il n'est pas rentré avant chez Pressa. C'est... «
20 km de l'arrivée. »
Pour un petit gabarit comme...
Si, hein, l'importance, on y revient de la piste aussi. Qui a donc, et ça devient une mode, hein, fait l'impasse sur le week-end d'ouverture en Belgique.
Ouais.
Démare a fait ça, Cancellara a fait ça, Van Mark a fait ça cette fois-ci.
Ouais. Il y a quand même encore beaucoup.
À moins qu'il y ait ce qui arrive assez régulièrement, une chose qui se passe au niveau tactique entre le bas de la Cipressa et le pied du Poggio, on risque en effet de se trouver avec un groupe très imposant.
Donc, qui va rouler? Qui va se...
Stannard descend mieux que Visconti.
Il creuse, hein?
Absolument.
Il creuse hein, par rapport au peloton.
Descente très propre aussi à l'avant du peloton. Regardez, les écarts sont minimes. Hein. Ça va... L'équipe peloton va plus vite que...
C'est parti tout seul. Hein.
Oui. A pris quelques dizaines de mètres. Et Kinnock est là. Ah, si Kinnock est là... Kinnock était à côté de Matthews. Hein. Ah. Confirmé, on ne peut pas... On va revenir là maintenant sur le plat, le long de la côte. Il doit faire un effort. Visconti qui se retourne. C'est maintenant qu'il faut voir si ça s'entend ou pas, hein, qu'on a parfois tendance à se relever, on regarde où est le leader, on fait un peu l'inventaire.
Et... Il y a plusieurs coureurs qui sont sortis du peloton, juste après moi. Hein.
Puoi venire per la premiazione dopo la
Ça roule, hein? Bête à rouler, hein? On est seul, hein?
Oui. Stannard. Et alors, qui est alors ce coureur-là qui travaille comme ça? Os. Ah, il est en grande forme aussi, lui. Hein?
Ouais.
Os qui revient sur les deux hommes de tête. Avec un coureur d'équipe ETIX. Un des deux qui avait fait la course. Et oui, là, il y a toujours un jeu tactique, là. Et ceux qui savent, Os c'est un habitué aussi de ce genre de situation. Hein. C'est pas la première fois qu'il tente ça. Il avait fait ça l'année dernière avec Thomas. Il s'était retrouvé d'ailleurs devant au pied du Poggio grâce à ça. Os, Visconti, Stannard. Le retour avec le numéro 16 de Montaguti.
Le coureur de Tix,
c'est Sabatini. Oui, c'est Sabatini. Je sais que vous avez toujours préféré Gabriella, que vous avez d'ailleurs déjà rencontré.
Ouais.
Mais on devra se contenter de celui-ci. Mais voilà qui est quand même, Eddy, relativement intéressant. Et on met la pression sur notamment l'équipe Katusha, puisqu'il y a quand même un équipier de Van Avermaet, un équipier de Stybar, un équipier de Valverde, un équipier de Kwiatkowski devant.
Sabatini ne roule pas. Hein.
Oui, mais derrière, ils ne vont pas rouler non plus. Donc, Visconti, Sabatini, Montaguti, Os et
14 secondes, c'est pas assez.
Os 9e en 2012. Premier leader de Tirreno Adriatico. Il est le premier des coureurs de l'équipe BMC à avoir franchi la ligne lors de la victoire. Et il y a là un 5e, 6e coureur de Katusha qui vient se mettre. Donc clairement tout le poids de la course sur l'équipe de Christophe. C'est normal.
À part Sabatini, ne roule pas.
Mais c'est bien vu de la part de ces équipes. Mettre un homme comme ça. S'il manque un homme tout à l'heure à Christophe pour boucher un trou dans les 2 derniers kilomètres, peut-être que ça peut se jouer maintenant. Ce sont des détails. Et pour le moment, les Van Avermaet, Sagan, Stybar, Nibali ont toujours quelques cartouches. Hein.
Oui, oui.
Et là maintenant, Eddy aussi se propulse dans les kilomètres qui viennent maintenant, dans les minutes qui viennent, le placement pour le pied du Poggio. Hein. Avec un groupe aussi important.
Ouais, aussi important. Ça va, ça risque de frotter.
La Via Aurelia, sur une route nationale.
Beaucoup de coureurs. Hein. Ça risque encore de... Il vaut mieux dans les 20 premiers maintenant. Hein.
Oui, et on sent hein, ce qui est vraiment caractéristique de cette course à ce moment aussi, qui suscite à la fois l'envoûtement et l'énervement. Il y a un mélange des deux, que seuls les champions parviennent à bien gérer ça. Être patient, mais pas trop.
Ça revient derrière. Allez,
il y a quand même un équipier qui participe. De ces tics, je crois que c'est de nouveau Brambilla et Stybar qui viennent se replacer à l'avant. On n'a pas vu Gaviria.
Sabatini.
Comme vous le disiez, Eddy, c'est de loin celui qui travaille le moins. Sabatini reste en 5e position, ne passe pas. Tandis que les autres sont actifs. On soulignera aussi le bon travail de l'équipe AG2R qui avait quand même placé Bagdonas, qui maintenant...
Oui, c'est une équipe qui... Un peu de nouvelles, pas de nouvelles de Bolen non plus.
Aucune, on l'a pas vu. Backlands a pu rentrer dans le peloton à temps, donc il est là, lui. Il a été ralenti à un meilleur endroit que Matthews. Et ce reflet dans la mer, superbe.
Malitagia.
Je regardais les décisions avant le Poggio, on en avait parlé. Bugno 90, Merck 76, Gimondi 74, Dancelli 70. C'est quand même rare. Avant d'aller chercher cette célèbre colline.
Stannard n'était pas content. Hein.
Non. Et donc quand je disais tout le poids de la course, il y a un deuxième coureur quand même de Boasson-Hagen qui vient aider. Et on va avoir forcément un Tinkoff aussi.
Oui.
Donc Cavendish lâché, on ne discute même pas, mais non. Je pense que c'était déjà clair avant. L'homme protégé, c'est Boasson-Hagen.
Oui.
Aujourd'hui, pour la formation Dimension Data, Boasson-Hagen, meilleur classement l'année dernière, 10e ici. Ouais, Stannard qui sent que ça roule bien. derrière.
Non, ça a attaqué, Sabatine a fermé le trou et maintenant c'est un air qui revient sur les 3.
Il dit on est à moins de 4 km du pied du Poggio.
Ouais.
Ce Poggio que vous avez mythifié, qui a été ajouté pour la première fois aux 3 capis en 1960.
Quand on arrive là, en dessous du tunnel, c'est...
On sent que vous vivez, hein, il dit, c'est passionnant, c'est vrai.
Plutôt on revient.
Donc le Poggio, 3 km 300 d'ascension à 4,3%. Et
c'est des équipiers de Boissonhagen qui roulent. Hein.
Oui, Boissonhagen et Sagan prennent leurs responsabilités.
Et on est beaucoup. Hein.
La météo, un vent qui n'a pas été très défavorable.
Non.
Os se relève, on a compris, et on va... C'est aussi assez rare ça. On va arriver avant le pied du Poggio, à moins qu'il y ait encore quelqu'un qui tente quelque chose, parce que maintenant il va y avoir un petit moment d'accalmie. Qui a encore envie, qui a les jambes, qui ose maintenant tenter quelque chose. C'est peut-être revenu un petit peu trop tôt. L'équipe de Nibali qui vient reprendre le relais.
Oui.
Kinnock qui est revenu, le champion de Grande-Bretagne.
Moi je crois qu'on va s'attendre à une attaque de Nibali dans le Poggio. Hein.
D'accord. Regardez, tout le monde là, les équipiers se retournent, regardent où sont les leaders, où sont les adversaires. On s'épie, on se regarde, c'est traditionnel, c'est de plus en plus nerveux. Et arrive et dit devant nous cette célèbre colline où on cultive des fleurs sous les serres. C'est la spécialité de San Remo. Et dans quelques instants, virage à droite. La montée, la cabine téléphonique, la descente, les 2 km de plat, la fontaine et la Via Roma, il dit. Tout est concentré vraiment sur la fin. On part à 0, mais avec 290 km dans les jambes.
Et avec beaucoup de coureurs. Hein. C'est rarissime de voir autant de coureurs au pied du Poggio. Hein.
C'est vrai, c'est très rare.
Pas de tous les côtés. Hein.
Et ils sont nombreux. Ils n'ont peut-être jamais été aussi nombreux à se dire « Et si c'était pour moi cette fois-ci »
Exactement.
Ils sont nombreux à vouloir aller au sprint. Ils sont nombreux à ne pas vouloir aller au sprint. C'est toute la bagarre, c'est tout l'intérêt de cette course atypique. Le seul monument qui est fait pour les sprinters, mais on ne gagne pas nécessairement comme sprinter, heureusement. Et l'équipe de Van Avermaet qui emmène avec Os. Quelle solidité. Reza qui se relève. Gros travail de Os.
Sky, là, ça frottait. Hein.
Van Avermaet est très bien. Hein. Très bien, franchement. Et il a la confiance, je vous l'ai dit. Et Matthews est là, il dit. Matthews est là, mais tout derrière. Est-ce qu'il peut encore gagner en étant là, dans la roue de...
C'est difficile. Il doit remonter. Hein.
Mais tout seul, c'est ça qui m'étonne.
Voilà.
On y est, le Poggio di San Remo. Sous la conduite de Rowe. Et 3 coureurs pour l'équipe Sky, s'il vous plaît. Alors on regarde, petit moment, encore on sait, puis Bakeland s'est très bien placé aussi aux avant-postes. Christophe est remonté, il est bien mis, Cancellara, Sagan, tous les favoris sont là. Il faut quand même être dans les 10 premiers là maintenant.
Ouais, c'est pour ça que Matthews, ça m'étonnerait. Hein.
Et Katusha nous refait le coup du début de la Cipressa.
Ouais.
C'est normal. Et l'homme qui fait ça, il dit, si j'ai bien vu, c'est Guarnieri. C'est Guarnieri, puisque Haller n'est plus là. C'est lui qui fait le travail. On a Galopin qui a côté Sagan.
Oui, dans les avant-postes, avec son maillot de champion de Norvège.
Guarnieri et Christophe qui laissent la main, si j'ose dire, à l'équipe BMC de Van Avermaet. Caruso avec Van Avermaet dans la roue, Valverde revient aussi. Ils se mettent presque tous sur une ligne. Dites-moi, ça va être un... Et quand à combien? À 300? À 250? À 100 mètres avant?
Oui, oui.
Qui va oser le premier?
Voilà.
Démarrage long, imparable, comme vous saviez le faire. Accélération, percussion.
C'est vraiment bien, il faut attendre.
C'est trop tôt, hein?
Ouais,
ouais, c'est trop tôt. Le placement est important, ne pas se laisser après perdre son placement.
Oui.
Si on compte donc les 10 km entre le départ fictif et le départ réel et les 6 km supplémentaires ajoutés du côté du Turquino, les coureurs ont 300 km dans les jambes et dit maintenant 6h45 minutes de course.
Ouais.
Et qui va s'adjuger cette 107e édition de la Classicissima? Ils n'ont jamais été aussi nombreux.
Oui.
Ça, c'est Sabatini.
Sabatini qui
oui,
a des difficultés.
Et je crois Vandenberg, le grand Vandenberg aussi, c'est celui qu'on avait le plus vu travailler, prendre les relais. Il y a un coureur d'équipe Lamprey qui est tombé, c'est Modolo. Ah, lui, il ne gagnera pas. Sacha Modolo. Ça, c'est Vandenberg. Lâché. Et attaque, le premier qui attaque, c'est un coureur de... Est-ce que c'est pas Pozzato? Un équipier de Pozzato?
Pozzato.
C'est Pozzato, c'est le dernier Italien vainqueur. Il y a 10 ans, dernier Italien qui soulève la clameur des tifosi.
C'est un peu tôt.
Oui. Dernière victoire aussi pour Patrick Lefebvre, ce Milan-San Remo. Ah non, on nous dit que c'est Fedi. Non, il me semblait bien. Oui, parce que... Attention, Fedi, lui. Il a déjà gagné cette saison.
Ça roule derrière.
On revoit l'attaque. Fedi qui ne parvient pas, comme souvent dans ces cas-là, à creuser l'écart. Fedi qui a gagné le trophée La Eguelia. Quatrième de la côte étrusque. Les 2 courses d'ouverture du calendrier italien, avec évidemment une autre concurrence aujourd'hui. On est bien d'accord, une autre distance, on l'a déjà suffisamment dit. En tout cas, Fedi.
Qui est parti un petit peu plus plate dans le podio. Et c'est...
il sait que quand les grands vont essayer, ça n'ira pas pour lui. Donc pourquoi pas? C'est une équipe invitée, c'est pas mal.
Non, ça va remonter un petit peu. Là, c'est le moment si on veut attaquer. Ici. Voilà.
Et alors, il y a un Astana qui est sorti avec un FDJ. Et est-ce que c'est pas Galopin qui sort là? C'est un peu ce style, Eddy.
Oui.
Oui, il anticipe les leaders, c'est pas mal vu. Baume est un petit peu en retrait. Galopin qui a pris quelques mètres. Oui, Galopin qui, notamment sur Paris-Nice, connaît la force des autres et anticipé.
Ça revient.
Avec un équipier, je crois que c'est Gatto qui fait ça, Eddy. Avec ce style assez compact.
Attaque de Sky maintenant.
Oui. Kwiatkowski. Kwiatkowski qui est parti, ça devient du lourd là. C'est Kwiatkowski. Oui. On sait comment il a été champion du monde et lui il a pris quelques mètres. Et Sagan n'y va pas. Sagan reste en 4e position. Kwiatkowski.
Pas loin.
Van Avermaet a pris la roue de Sagan, est en 4e position dans le peloton. Kwiatkowski. Stannard qui a fait un gros travail, vous l'avez vu, avant d'aborder le Poggio. Et donc Gatto, c'est Cancellara en 2e position, Eddy.
Je pense.
Oui, Gatto, Cancellara, Sagan, Van Avermaet. C'est du lourd derrière Kwiatkowski. Et ça bouge derrière, ça bouge maintenant.
Il faut, c'est le moment.
C'est là qu'il faut y aller.
Il ne faut pas attendre.
Et c'est Nibali. Nibali est sorti avec Cancellara derrière.
Faut pas lui... C'est le moment.
Et déjà la cabine téléphonique, on tourne à gauche. Il n'y a pas eu d'écart. Il n'y a pas eu d'écart.
Nibali.
Tout va se jouer dans la descente ou sur le plat ou au sprint. Nibali est sorti juste avant. Est-ce que ça présage une descente à bloc de Nibali? Ah oui, il doit le faire. Hein. Kwiatkowski, quelques mètres d'avance. Nibali dans la roue. Et puis Cancellara, Sagan, Stybar. Van Avermaet est un peu plus loin. Hein. Il a perdu le sillage de Sagan, Van Avermaet. Attention.
Un grand descendeur. Hein. Il est parti comme ça au championnat du monde aussi. Hein. Enfin, derrière,
Kwiatkowski contre Nibali dans le virage, ça, vous allez aimer ce spectacle-là. Alors je vous laisse, Eddy, je vous laisse. C'est le spectacle, vous êtes inégalable pour nous expliquer ça.
Ici,
allez-y.
Oui. Ici, après chaque virage, il faut se remettre en marche, il faut aller à fond et essayer de... Par exemple, c'est un virage ici qu'on ne freine pas. Il y a 2-3 virages où il faut freiner et on voit que Nibali, quand même, Kwiatkowski en point de mire et qui revient.
Valverde, Boasson-Hagen, un coureur de l'équipe Lotto, je ne sais pas si c'est encore Galopin. Et Van Avermaet vient seulement après. Enfin, seulement, c'est pas si mal.
C'est pas si mal.
Nibali, non, n'insiste pas. Cancellara passe.
S'ils attendent.
Ah, Nibali renonce dans la poursuite derrière Kwiatkowski et Démare.
Avec tout le monde dans la roue, Cancellara a aussi intérêt à rouler, hein, donc il ne faut pas...
Les écarts sont minimes, on le voit. Hein. C'est le duel désormais, ça n'est plus Kwiatkowski-Nibali, c'est Kwiatkowski-Cancellara. Il est en forme, hein. Il est bien Cancellara. Regardez ça.
Regardez ça. Avec Sagan dans la roue, non?
Valverde est très bien aussi. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on nous montre là? Ça n'a pas d'intérêt pour nous. Aucun intérêt. Ah si, quand même. C'est là qu'il y a eu la chute avec Gilbert et toute la bande, me semble-t-il, hein, je crois. L'année dernière. Kwiatkowski, toujours, était impliqué d'ailleurs dans cette chute-là l'année dernière. Et il passe. Cancellara, qui ne laisse absolument pas Kwiatkowski creuser l'écart. Et Sagan y va. Prend le relais avec Stybar, Valverde.
Nibali qui va
Boasson-Hagen, Galopin.
Nibali qui attaque.
Avec personne. Et Stybar va. Stybar. Il attaque en se retournant. Stybar, Valverde, Cancellara, Sagan, Boasson-Hagen, Galopin. Il y a un coureur de l'équipe Cannondale, je ne sais pas qui c'est.
Grand virage maintenant à gauche.
Navarro-Doscas. 4 secondes. Et on va arriver sur le Corso Cavallotti. Parce que Cancellara a coupé un peu son effort, Sagan n'est pas allé, mais lui il continue à bloquer.
Ça c'est le grand virage à droite, hein, ici à gauche. Et puis maintenant on va arriver sous la Aurélia. Hein. On est à 200 mètres de l'Aurélia.
Et Valverde maintenant qui a pris les choses en main, il dit devant Stybar, Nibali, Cancellara, Sagan, Boasson-Hagen, Galopin, Navarro-Doscas a confirmé. Il y a encore Brambilla qui est là aussi.
C'est Cancellara qui y va.
Et attendez, il y a trois. Attention qu'un des trois ce soit Gaviria. Hein. J'ai vu 3 maillots Ethics. Hein. Attention. Alors là, on peut avoir une sensation énorme là aujourd'hui. Hein.
Voilà, il est sous l'Aurélia. Il tourne à droite et sous l'Aurélia.
À vérifier, si le numéro 113 est là, il vaudrait mieux le lâcher avant l'arrivée. Hein. Ça, je peux vous dire. Il a 1 an de plus que vous lors de vos premières victoires. Mais à voir, parce que d'hélicoptère comme ça, c'est impossible à dire. Mais Stybar, certainement. Brambilla, peut-être. Il y a Trentin, peut-être, qui peut être là aussi.
Il y a l'avantage. Hein.
Et Kwiatkowski, à 2 km. C'est possible ou pas?
Si derrière, ils hésitent un moment, c'est fini. Il ne faut pas hésiter. Il y a coureurs Ethics qui... Probablement le fait qu'ils sont 3, mais il y a beaucoup de coureurs encore. Hein. Ouh là là.
Alors... Et Cancellara qui fait son effort maintenant. Cancellara qui est parti, qui joue son va-tout. Oh, quelle attaque, quel démarrage. Ça, c'est du Cancellara, c'est puissant. Regardez le 3e qui ne sait pas y aller. Il n'y a qu'un coureur Ethics dans sa roue. C'est Kwiatkowski contre Cancellara. Et c'est qui le gars qui est dans sa roue là? Trentin? Trentin, je suis presque sûr que c'est Trentin, oui, c'est lui. Mais ça ne marche pas, ça se relève et ça c'est la chance de Kwiatkowski.
No, Kazuki rejoint. Kazuki rejoint.
Oui, oui.
No, poi che non possa neanche vedere. Io non lo vedo l'elicottero, quindi non mi puoi vedere che fanno pas
Pris.
Il
Autant pour moi.
rejoint Kazuki.
Autant pour moi. Boissonnague en attaque. Il veut pas sprinter. C'est Van Avermaet qui va. Boissonnague avec Van Avermaet. Oh oh, Eddy. Qu'est-ce qui se passe là? La Fontaine. Est-ce qu'il peut le faire?
Dernier kilomètre.
Boissonnague, Van Avermaet, qui est le troisième? Trentin, Sagan. Van Avermaet est bien mis, hein? Attendez, il est bien mis. Fin de... C'est pas Gaviria? C'est Gaviria ou pas? Oh, oh, oh,
Christo. Oh là là. Christo.
Et chute de Gaviria.
Oh là.
Ah, il est tombé. Ah, inattention à la fin. Et c'est Démare. C'est un Français, c'est Démare.
Allez Fred, allez Fred.
Et Gaviria aurait probablement gagné, il est tombé, c'était bien Gaviria et Démare, Arnaud Démare qui s'impose. 21 ans après Jalabert, il n'en croit pas ses yeux. Un sprint chaotique, Eddy, incroyable, incroyable. Sprint chaotique, il se demande ce qui lui arrive. Arnaud Démare.
Costaud, hein.
En 30 ans, il y a eu Fignon, Jalabert et maintenant il y a Démare. Oh là là! Et la déception doit être terrible. C'était bien lui, il avait fait tout ce qu'il fallait, hein, Gaviria. On ne pourra jamais être sûr qu'il aurait gagné, mais franchement...
Il avait quand même beaucoup de chance. Hein.
Ah oui, oui,
la manière dont il a cherché.
Oui.
C'est lui qui a été chercher, rester dans la roue de Cancellara. Hein.
Il faut... Eddy, on va analyser ça, c'est bien Swift qui fait 2 à confirmer.
Ah, mais ils étaient beaucoup. Ils étaient beaucoup...
Démare en tout cas,
chapeau, hein.
Complètement. Comment analyser cette vie à Rome nous a réservé des surprises et Démare qui est seulement en train de réaliser, qui s'est dit incroyable, il a produit son effort.
Abandonné au Paris-Nice à cause.
C'est pas de sa faute si Gaviria est tombé. 12e vainqueur français après Petit Breton.
c'est la plus belle que j'ai pu remporter. Aujourd'hui c'était mon jour avec tout ce qui m'est arrivé. Je n'aurais pas cru pouvoir l'emporter. C'est vrai que je reviens de très loin avec une chute avant la Cipressa. J'ai fait une montée de Cipressa vraiment très très costaud. Et...
Tu y croyais après la chute?
Non, j'ai baissé les bras. La voiture du directeur sportif m'a doublé. Elle m'a dit ne t'inquiète pas, il y a le groupe à Matthews derrière, tu vas essayer de rentrer. Bon, je me suis accroché à leur roue et puis en fin de compte, ils ont vraiment monté très fort la Cipressa. J'avais aussi William Bonnet qui a fait le pied, et puis après Mathieu Ladagnou qui a fait le haut. J'ai retrouvé Ignatas Konovalovas dans la descente avec Kevin Reza et Mathieu Ladagnou qui ont fait un gros boulot pour revenir au pied du Poggio. Et arrivé là, je pensais que j'avais usé déjà énormément d'énergie. Et j'ai fait une montée du Poggio un peu en retrait, en voulant me cacher au maximum. En haut, je bascule plutôt loin. Et voilà, il n'y avait que 2 km en bas pour se replacer rapidement, pour jouer la gagne. Et voilà, il y a des jours où tout sourit. L'année dernière, c'était pas une année pour moi. J'ai eu énormément de pépins. Voilà, je ne doutais pas à ma progression. L'année dernière, j'ai vraiment... Voilà, je sais que j'ai progressé et aujourd'hui, c'est le fruit de 2 ans qui paye d'une seule fois. Donc voilà, je suis content. Ouais.
Nella classicissima di primavera, signore e signori, Arnaud Démare, versista, più di onoranza, i primi 3 classificati.